Thank you all for coming. This is an awesome turnout. One of our better turnouts. I'm sorry, the pizza ran out. It's the first time that's ever happened, so sorry about that. I'll order more next time. So my name is Jonathan, Jonathan Hebert. I'm the organizer of the group. I started it about 2.5 years ago, and we meet first Thursdays for the new people. Usually here, hopefully here most of the time. Every now and then we'll be sponsored or we'll be hosted at a different spot. So this is our night and this is our spot. So how many new people or first timers do we have in the room to the group? That is amazing. Or maybe it's bad because nobody's returning. I don't know. All right, so let's. I'm going to try something new tonight. If you're a first timer, shout out how the heck you heard about this group and what made you come. Anybody?
Meetup. From another meetup.
From another meetup?
Another meetup.
All right, good. Okay. So a couple of things that I like to get across every time. The meetup is totally like self-sustaining. I don't really spend a lot of effort like trying to find people to speak on different topics or sponsor the group. It normally comes from volunteers from within the group. So sometimes like Spiceworks is sponsoring tonight, they'll provide the speakers, but a lot of the speakers are just people who have something interesting to talk about. If you have anything interesting you're working on. So the best way to become a speaker is just come talk to me, or just click on my face on the Meetup site and email me, and you're the next speaker. It's pretty much that simple. So it doesn't have to be super fancy. You don't have to be an expert. You might be like a total beginner, and maybe you just learned something really cool. I guarantee you over half the people in the room probably haven't learned it yet, you know? So the group, my whole vision behind this is just that people will start talking about interesting, cool JavaScript stuff, and we can all learn from each other. So that's the idea, and thank you all for coming. Okay, so tonight, we're gonna have kind of a round robin, 3 talks from Spiceworks. Again, thank you to them. They're providing the pizza and the drinks and the speakers, so yay Spiceworks. Before we get started, Shannon from Spiceworks is just gonna say a little bit about what they're all about and why you might want to work there if you are a JavaScript programmer. And then we'll just get right into the talks. And if we have time afterwards, feel free to mingle and hang out until 9 o'clock. And then we can meet again next month. So Shannon, take it away.
Thanks, Jonathan.
You got it.
Thanks, everybody, for being here, all you first-timers and all you return people. And I'm not going to bore you telling you what a great special place Spiceworks is for developers, and take up your time telling you what a great time the entire development team had at Topgolf all afternoon. But I just want to say we're in high growth mode. We're looking for entry-level, mid-level, senior-level coders for UI, full stack, back end. If you want to hear more one-on-one, you can reach me through the JavaScript Meetup page. And also, if you want to talk with one of our devs one-on-one and just see what the day-to-day is like, I'll set you up with them. So thank you for being here. That's it.
Okay, thank you. And one thing I forgot to mention, these meetups, this Capital Factory provides the space for free. It's awesome. They have recently introduced this video streaming thing. So you see the camera here. The whole event is it's up above Shannon's head right there. So the whole event is being recorded and I think live streamed. So in the future, I wasn't really aware of all this stuff. So in the future, there'll be a link, even after the event, the recording and the link will be hosted by Capital Factory somewhere, and you can come watch the talks afterwards. So if I forget to post it on the page, somebody just ask me. And in the future, all of our stuff will be live streamed. So it's really cool. Okay, who's the first speaker? First victim. All right, Brian. It's Brian, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks for letting me know on the camera.
Yeah. So now you're being live streamed.
I'm being recorded.
Do you want the mic or not?
Can you guys hear me well in the back?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Good response. Yes. Kind of.
Let me know a little bit.
I'll project a little better then.
There's chairs up here, guys. If you want to see, there's chairs over here.
Cheers, but no pizza.
All right. So my name is Brian Bravo. I work at Spiceworks. I've been working on the web development industry for a little over 5 years. I started and the tech side of things doing IT a few lifetimes ago, and back then I got familiarized with servers and databases, and that kind of led me into playing with some PHP, and then I wanted to make some more websites, and I kind of went into WordPress, HTML, and I, through all these years, I've been able to explore different technologies and work in different projects with all this different languages, frameworks, libraries, and whatnot. I'm guessing that for maybe the majority of us, or maybe some of us, that's kind of been the adventure of web development. We started somewhere else, and our curiosity kind of took us in a different path, and now we're here. And like I said, now I work at Spiceworks as a UI UX developer. And I love doing front-end development. I've done a little bit of back-end and front-end. I really like doing front-end development because I can quickly see a result. This is something I was playing with with CSS animations a few weeks ago. And over a few hours on a Friday night, I made a little flame that had sparks. So yay! But that just excites me, the fact that you can quickly put something together and just share it with people.
What was that?
What was that? Oh, that was
It was like an IDE and a
great
browser?
question. This here is codepen.io. It's a little site created by Chris Boyer and a couple of other people where you can go and you can put in your HTML up in this area where you can see the mouse. Yeah, up in the top right, you can have your CSS and your JavaScript. You can also use preprocessors there. They're built in. So you can select whether you use Markdown or Haml, or in that case I use Haml. Or you can use SAS or LESS or whichever preprocessor you prefer for the HTML or CSS or JavaScript. So I use this tool quite a bit to prototype things kind of quickly. I don't have to set anything up on my computer. Everything is on the cloud and it's ready to go. So going back to the presentation. So today I wanted to share a few tips that some things I wish I had known before I started my JavaScript journey. Some of the things that I'm going to share with you are kind of generic and applicable to not just JavaScript, but to any type of development or even some of the things in life. There are a few points that are very specific to JavaScript. The first thing I wanted to share with you is that learning JavaScript is hard. Right? Don't let anybody tell you anything different. It is hard, and you will have to learn to speak a new language, especially if you haven't had a computer science background. Well, it's just gonna rock your world. If you're here, raise your hand if you've been doing JavaScript for a year, for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Okay, cool, awesome. So, learning HTML and CSS is a world of its own, and it's really hard sometimes to get used to the positioning and to the way the elements are floated and distributed on the screen. And learning JavaScript just adds another layer of complexity to it all. One thing I remember clearly when I was first learning JavaScript is that I felt I was the only person in the world right there in front of my computer learning JavaScript. There was nobody else doing it, just me. So a lot of times I got stuck in problems, and I thought, no one is going to be able to help me in this. But one thing to remember in your JavaScript journey is that you're not the first one to travel the path. Many people have gone before you and they're way ahead, and many people are thinking about joining the path because they're seeing you or seeing others. So don't feel alone. Don't be isolated. Find a buddy, find a mentor, find somebody that you can go to and get help. Where can you find those type of people? In meetups like this. This is a great place to come and just afterwards, chat with people and say, hey, I'm starting to learn about this, and just be friendly and share what you're doing. Even if you may think it's the simplest thing in the world, whatever you're working on is, but it just gets us excited. We're just kind of like that here around Austin. And actually, that's why I moved to Austin, is because I wanted to be part of the web development community here. Also, along the way, you're going to feel like giving up. Let me point out to those pictures really quick, right? How many of you have done a juice fast just because you wanted to try it? Right? You're like, yeah, I want to eat juice fast, and then somewhere along the way, you're like, oh, this sucks! I want to eat a pizza. We're doing a little thing at home doing gluten-free this time, so I can't eat pizza. So I kind of feeling it right now. How many of you have done a meal challenge? right? You're like, yeah, we're gonna do this. And somewhere along the way, you're like, oh my gosh, I made a horrible mistake, right? You have all these people looking at you, and it's kind of embarrassing. And of course, you know the Lord of the Rings. That how many of you have had to walk the Mordor of darkness? Anybody? No, I'm sure Frodo wanted to quit at some point. And you'll feel like that sometimes when you're doing JavaScript. You're gonna feel like, oh, I don't want to do this. Did I make a mistake in trying to learn this? It's just that one little problem. You need to step back. It's okay. It's all right. You're gonna get there. It's just a little uphill for that part of the journey. One thing I will guarantee you, though, is that every step of the way is rewarding. I mean, I remember the first time I figured out how to make a little menu toggle, open and close with pure JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript. And then when I discovered jQuery, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's .toggle. That just changed my life. But that was like amazing. And you get that feeling where you can get the browser to do interactive things. It's exciting, and you're gonna feed yourself with that, and you're gonna, have the desire to keep them going. So to sum up this part here, learning JavaScript is not simple. It's not, and it's gonna take you a while. It will take you a while, which takes me to my next point. In order to learn JavaScript, you're gonna have to write a lot of it. You're gonna have to read a lot of it. You're gonna have to write it more and read more and write more, and this is just a skill that you need to get your hands on. Tutorials, when you do them online, they're a good introduction to JavaScript and to different libraries and frameworks and plugins and all that, but they kind of give you a false sense of accomplishment in the fact that you go and you enter the things they want you to enter, and you get a little smiley face, a little star, and you're like, yay, but at the end of the day, you didn't really do something that people can use or that you can use. So my suggestion would be to find small projects that you can work on. Small short-term projects, even if you're just gonna go and watch somebody do something small, right? Just do it. There are events all the time in Austin. That's why I love this town. A few weeks ago, we had a Finish Up weekend where just a bunch of people that are learning web development or they're really good at web development got together with designers and just all sorts of people because we all have projects that we haven't finished yet. So that weekend is prepare for you to finish up that project. And everybody can go there and ask questions and get help from one of your peers. Another thing I would suggest is to prototype things, right? I show you CodePen, and that's what I use to prototype things. It's free. Go create an account and start tinkering with things. If you ever wonder how one of those little menus toggles or how do you make a slideshow, yeah, you can easily go and download a plugin, jQuery plugin, and put it in, hook it up to the HTML elements, and you have it working. But how cool would it be if you can make one, right? Just so you can understand how it works. Just in case if one of your slides that you're using ever breaks, you kind of understand the inner workings of them. And you will become familiar with this screen. You will live there. You will totally live there, Raise your hand if you've seen that screen this week, right? That's awesome. That's awesome, because you know what that means? That means that you are doing something. That means that you have written something. That means you're almost there. That's what it means. It means that you're progressing. It means that you're moving forward in your JavaScript journey. Along with this, don't stress out too much about it. Things are going to break. Things are going to work. You're not alone. Once again, you can get help. I'm lucky enough to work at a place where I work with really smart people. So I started working at Spiceworks over 4 months ago or so, and I've learned a lot, a ton, because I'm surrounded by people that know JavaScript and know programming and know the technologies that we use at work, and it's very easy to just go and ask a question and get it answered. And one thing to keep in mind is, I'll be honest with you, right? The first few things you do are going to be insignificant. They will mean the world to you because they mean the world to me, right? The little things that you do, and it's important that you do it, but it's okay if they break. It's okay if you can't figure it out. Just go ask help and you're on your way. So to summarize my second point is that you will find bugs. Right? You will run into them because you need to do a lot of work to get to where you want to be. The third point I wanted to share with you is that after you've been working, learning JavaScript for a while, either as a hobby or because that's the career choice that you made, it's good to step back and take a look at what you've done. I mean, how many of you are familiar with things like this? right? They work, right? They do the work, and you can get by, but they're not going to last. It's not maintainable. It's probably not safe. A lot of times, when you learn JavaScript, you just want to see it and work, and it works, and you just move on and forget about it. But you're gonna get the most out of your experience. You're gonna get the most out of your journey if you stop and contemplate your code for a little bit. Okay. So my suggestion, a tip that I wish I would have known is that, whenever I write code, I need to make it readable. I need to make it work. I need to make it testable, and then figure out ways to make it faster and to make it shorter. To just be able to write more efficient JavaScript. Another little thing that I discovered a few months ago was style guides, right? These style guides, you can find them everywhere. I think Google, Twitter, and a bunch of other companies, maybe the companies you work on, have style guides. Basically, these are guides, they're like points that show you what to do, what to avoid while you write your code, and what things you should do, right? From spacing to, hey, instead of using for loops, just use a while loop, or many different things. Find those and study them, because you learn the things that you need to do and the things you need to avoid. Another tip I will give you is, once you're coding and you're gonna feel like you've been doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over, that's because your code is probably not, you're repeating yourself. So you need to keep your code dry. Don't repeat yourself. And also, another thing that has helped me quite a bit in learning JavaScript has been to program with somebody else. That's called pair programming. And that has been, I probably had a handful of those experiences. And at times it may feel like, hey, I'm just sitting here watching you and listening to you while you code. But if you ask questions, you're going to get the most out of it. And you're going to learn a lot. And you get to ask the person who knows more than you do, why do you do it this way? Why do you choose that? And it gets even better once that person that knows a lot more than you asks you code. And you're like, I'm really nervous. I'm just going to do this. And I hope it works. And then you get asked a lot of questions that perhaps you have been avoiding to answer. But in the end, you're moving along your JavaScript journey. So to summarize that, there will be the need to improve your code. It's not good enough to use the duct tape JavaScript and just move things along. You'll get there. You will be forced, if you do that for a job, you will be forced to move to make it better. Going into my fourth point is that you will have to master your craft. To stay competent, especially in this industry. Jonathan we were talking before the meetup, and a couple of years ago there wasn't this turnout, and now we have an amazing turnout to the JavaScript meetups and to a lot of other meetups that are web related, and it's because the market is hot. There's so much demand for it, but we need to stay competent. So you will be required to master JavaScript, and for that you need to be aware of anti-patterns, which is basically, there's experience of decades of other languages and also of years of JavaScript, of things that you should avoid because they're bad practices, and also good patterns to follow, like modules and gates and event delegation and listeners and a lot of other things that, if you keep going to these meetups, they're probably going to get covered. Another thing I would suggest is don't just copy and paste code. That would be super tempting to go to Stack Overflow and just be like, well, this seems to work, put it there, it works. I don't know what it does, but it works, and just move forward. That's like the duct tape. Avoid that. If you're going to master this craft, understand what you're doing. And if you don't understand, ask somebody. Also, how many new JavaScript things were released this week? If you follow Twitter or other social media, you lose count because it's like an endless stream of new things. Oh, I have this framework. Oh, I have this library. Oh, I have this better way to do things. What I've done with that, I used to follow all that stuff and try to play with everything, and it just drove me nuts to the point where I just shut it up for a few weeks, came back, and guess what? Nothing had changed. More things kept just coming, and I hadn't really missed much. So my suggestion with that would be to pick a framework, pick a library, pick a plugin, and find a project for it. Be aware of what's out there and just find something, play with it, and then move on to the next thing. My last point and the fourth step is to help somebody else. Remember, when you're in the beginning of the path, it's daunting, and you see this huge path, uphill path that you gotta follow. And somewhere along the way, it's gonna take you months, it might take you years. you're gonna be over here, and it's nice to just go back a few steps, you know, and help somebody that may be feeling lost. And in doing that, it's also gonna help you learn even more. I mean, I remember when I was explaining for loops to a couple of designers a few months ago, and I was like, dude, this is complicated stuff, you know? And the day to day, you don't think it is, but for somebody that has never coded before, especially in JavaScript, it's just like worlds apart sometimes. It's just completely something new. To summarize this point, you know, you will write JavaScript like a boss. That'll be you. You know, you're gonna feel so proud about it, and you will be. This is a great spot to be. You will be compensated well for it. And to go into my last point, you need to endure. Like I said, going back to the beginning, you will feel like quitting many times. You'll feel frustrated, and that's just part of the trip. That's just part of the experience. Many things in life are like that, and JavaScript just has that as well. You know, at the beginning, sometimes what I want to do is like, okay, I'm going to learn JavaScript in 2 months. You know, just go through it as I can, and go do all the things that I can. And at the end of 2 months, I was burnt out, and I didn't want to know much about it anymore. So pace yourself, but be constant. You know, don't give up. It will take a lot of work, but in the end, it will be very rewarding to get to further along the path. I myself am not an expert in JavaScript. I wouldn't say I know a lot about it. I'm still there in the journey as well. But I can see other people that are far ahead of me, and I can see that there's a path. I can see that if they have done it, I can do it as well. And sometimes when you start, you forget that. So to finish up, I'd like to share something with you. A little video that was made inspired by a quote by Ira Glass. He's a storyteller, and this is more applicable to creative work, but I think it applies to what we do as well. And I try to watch this every week or every 2 weeks just to keep me going because it helps. I don't know, I hope the audio works.
I've been having trouble with Vimeo recently.
Well, I hope it works. The audio.
Oh, there we go.
Tells people who are beginners, and somebody had told this to me, is that all of us do creative work. Like, you know, we get into it because we have taste. But like, there's a gap that for the couple of years that you're making stuff, what you're making isn't so good. Okay, it's not great. It's trying to be good. It has ambition, good, but it's not quite that good. But your taste that got you into the game, your taste is still killer, and your taste is good enough that you can tell that what you're making is kind of a disappointment to you. You know what I mean? A lot of people never get past this. A lot of people, they quit. And the thing I would just like say to you with all my heart is that most everybody I know who does interesting creative work, they went through a phase of years where they had really taste, they could tell what they were making wasn't as good as they wanted it to be. They knew it felt short. It didn't have this special thing that we wanted it to have. And the thing I would say to you is everybody goes through that. And if you go through it, through right now, you're just getting out of that phase, you gotta know that's totally normal. And the most important possible thing to do a lot of work, do a huge volume of work. Put yourself on a deadline so that every week or every month you know you can finish one story. Because it's only by actually going through a volume of work that you're actually going to catch up and close that gap. And the work you're making will be as good as your ambitions. In my case, like I took longer to figure out how to do this than anybody I've ever. It takes a while. It's going to take you a while. It's normal to take a while, and you just have to fight your way through that. Okay?
It's normal that it takes a while. It's okay. And sometimes when I'm still learning JavaScript, I forget that. So if there's one thing you can take away from my presentation today is that it takes a while. It's a journey. You're not going to just teleport there. You have to go through these experiences. I hope you found that. Oh, I don't think I showed you the summary point for that one. So let me go back. So to summarize that point there, fight for your Yo Adrian moment. You're gonna get there. You're gonna endure. It's been a pleasure to share these things with you. I hope it helps some of you, not all of you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we do the next one, there's some chairs over here, guys. If you don't want to come sit over here, we could set up some more.
Okay, I'm Eric Wood. Thanks for coming out tonight. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Contenteditable and rich text editing in the browser. And this is going to be kind of a weird presentation because I'm going to focus on a couple of problems I ran into implementing a rich text editor. And
Sorry. It's hard to hear you, and I'm close, and I can.
This is way better.
Yeah.
So I am a UI application developer at Spiceworks. I do a lot of Rails stuff. I write a lot of JavaScript, and yeah, that's pretty much it. And so I'm gonna just go and look at this presentation. So what is it? Contenteditable is content editable. I'm tired of saying it almost. For the last couple months I've been working with this. But think Microsoft Word in your web browser. And it's actually deceptively simple. Adding this attribute to an HTML element makes it editable. So to kind of give you an example that...
Is it part of the HTML5 spec?
No, actually. So okay, let me go into the history of it. It was introduced in IE 5.5. It dates back before that. So you'll see it in versions of IE4 as an ActiveX control. It was actually not really meant to be what it is today. It pretty much was just designed for a couple things Microsoft wanted to do, and then reverse engineered like 5 or 6 years later by the Mozilla people. And every other implementation is based on that initial implementation and the reverse engineering of that. So there's actually very little documentation on it. I think technically it's part of the DOM level 2 API, but that's it. So it's kind of, starting off with that is not very inspiring. There's not really much documentation on it. It operates a little bit differently in every browser. So we're going to go into the twilight zone really quick, where a lot of stuff's not going to make sense and things are going to behave in ways you wouldn't expect. So this is the Spiceworks WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get editor. We use it all over the Spiceworks community. It allows users to write posts in rich text. Admins can edit the HTML of the post, you can attach images, all kinds of cool stuff. And this is the root of all of this talk. This is a project of mine. We needed a better WYSIWYG editor. We had this really old version of CK editor, and it was holding us back. We had a bunch of cool stuff we wanted to implement, kind of like contextual tagging, think like how Twitter and Facebook allow you to tag users and whatnot. And we wanted something we could actually maintain. CK editor was this giant like blob of JavaScript. It's huge. It had 1 million files. So we grabbed a WYSI HTML5 after a little bit of research, and it's a cool little lightweight WYSIWYG editor, and a lot of the hard stuff had been solved for us, we thought. So we used it as a starting point, and then we quickly ran into a couple issues. So this is a very nonchalant Microsoft Word document. And so a common workflow you see, especially in like marketing, and we have a lot of people writing content that are pasting it in from sources such as Microsoft Word. The nice thing about rich text editing is it preserves the formatting. So if I were to copy this and maybe like screw with the fonts and whatnot, that would actually appear in the text editor that way. And saving the post would preserve that. And that's kind of gross. So that's no good. So let's talk about the system clipboard real quick. There's a bunch of different data types that actually get saved into it when you copy something. It's up to the application what to put into it. So like if I were to copy something from like Notepad or just plain text, be text/plain, some things will do like text/HTML. Microsoft Word will do like text/HTML, text/plain, and text/RTF. All of those except for text/plain are useless to us. By default, Contenteditable and the browser decided, we shouldn't give anybody control over this. We should just grab the text/HTML version and put that in whenever possible, and maybe plain text if that's an option. So it's kind of terrible because everybody has their own way of doing it. So mail.app, for example, the OS X email application has its own way of formatting things if I were to copy paste it. Microsoft Word has its own really bizarro version of it. So if so this is, I just wrote a Word document, and the only thing that it contained was the word WTF. And I pasted that into the editor in an early stage and just inspected the contents of the iframe afterwards. And this goes on for 350 lines, and it's really depressing. I don't get it. So that's kind of a deal breaker, because all of those styles, everything, all that crap gets dumped into our database. It gets presented that way. I mean, obviously, for user posts, we sanitize light HTML and stuff, but it ruins the whole experience. And admins, they need to be able to edit the raw source. So I can't just go stripping out styles and whatnot. WYSI HTML5 actually has stuff built in to deal with this, but it takes kind of a nuclear war approach where it just strips everything out. It has like this parser built into it that allows you to whitelist things, and that kind of got in our way really quickly because we were adding elements to it for our inline tagging, adding images and whatnot, and we were constantly fighting it. It was trying to reformat everything. So if I was a marketing person, I was going in and saying, we're going to float this image and we're going to add a couple styles to it. I can't go in and strip that out. So it's kind of, we have a conflict. So what do we do? There's a paste event we can use. Let's take a look at it. So I'm going to show you an example of the onPaste event. It's a JavaScript event we can bind to the Contenteditable element. It's kind of slow. It's just a little JS fiddle.
What is the event? Sorry.
onPaste. Yeah, so it fires whenever you hit, Control V, Command V, what have you. Anytime you're pasting something from the system clipboard. Thanks, that's really scary.
Looks like it's melting.
There we go. Okay. So I will make this a lot bigger. So the code's really simple. I have this content editable div where I set that to true. And to give you an idea, I'm actually editing this H1 tag as if it were not an H1 tag. I created an onPaste event right here and bound it to that div. And I'm going to go ahead and launch Chrome's debugger so we can play with that event and the contents of it. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. And I'm going to paste the contents of that Word document we're so fond of into here. Okay, it didn't fire it.
If it wants the console first.
Oh, that's right. Usually no, but okay. Let's paste that again. Okay, so now we are in the debugger, and I'm going to go ahead and there we go. Okay, it's two separate panes. Okay, so there's our code right there. So I'm going to talk loud for a second as I set down the microphone.
It's underneath the mic on the bottom.
Okay. So the event object is what we care about. That's what was passed into the event handler. So if we inspect it, right away we have this clipboard data attribute. And this is what we care about. So taking a look at this, it gives us access to a bunch of different stuff. So we can see the types that were passed in. So there's our data types, textless plain, HTML, RTF, and then files.
That's the response from the event?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's take a closer look at the clipboard data object. Okay, so there's a couple nice methods on this that allow us to get access to the data. Get data actually happens to be the one we want. You can pass in the type that you want out of it, and it'll return that to you. So if I did text/plain, I would get the plain text version of it, sans any kind of formatting. That's a problem we're going to run into later on. it's not as simple as just getting the plain text version. So we can get the text/HTML version, which is that wonderful blob. So that's the basic version of the on-paste event. So there's a couple caveats to this. It's supported by everybody except for IE, so we can't cover 100% of our use cases. And unfortunately, the Spiceworks community has a lot of people who use IE. It's okay, we don't hate them. It's as long as it's not IE8, we can deal with it. But Internet Explorer takes a weird approach to security. I generally approach I agree with where if you don't need to be doing it, they will keep you from doing it. So anybody who's messed with file input fields in IE knows this. If you touch it with JavaScript, you can't submit the form, things like that. It does the same thing with clipboard. There's no such thing as clipboard data. You can still get it using window.get clipboard data, but it will ask you like, hey, this program wants to get access to your clipboard. That's really scary. You want it to, and it'll do that every single time. So that's not really feasible. So let's go back to the drawing board. There's a bunch of interesting solutions people have come up with for this, none of which really actually work all that well. So here's the first hack. If you notice, if you were to take the contents of that Word document and paste it into a text area, everything works great. You get the plain text version of it and the formatting, and that's actually all we want. So what if we were to leverage that? This is where it gets kind of weird. We're gonna have to wait a minute. The idea is you have your Contenteditable element and you bind to the Control V or Command V keystroke instead of the on-paste event. And when that happens, that'll fire before the paste event. You redirect it to an invisible text area. The contents go into there. You grab them, you put them back in. So this is all very weird, and I'll show you why it kind of sucks, other than the fact that it's really squirrely. This is actually like one of the recommended ways to go about doing it, and it doesn't really pan out when you put this in a bigger application. It works fine in the JS fiddle. There's browser compatibility is decent. You're at the mercy of the event system, and so let me show you. The idea is I have my Contenteditable div again, and so I'm binding to the key down event listener, and I am saying, hey, if it's Command or Control or and the V key, let's go ahead and give focus to this text area. And then we're going to set a timeout immediately after that happens. So as soon as the text area gets focused, the paste event happens, and the code to set this timeout to run like milliseconds later goes in and fetches the response and puts it into the Contenteditable. To show you this in practice, and let's slow that down a minute. So we're replacing new lines with line breaks and just setting the HTML and doing focus again to the Contenteditable. So let's say, let's set that to 1 second. Oops. So it goes into the text area. Yeah. That's not very, I don't like that a lot. So it worked okay, but you're at the mercy of time. Anytime you find yourself setting a timeout and doing something, X milliseconds later, you're going to run into issues. You can't always rely on things happening in that order in that amount of time. And we have to do a really quick timeout in order for that to seem seamless. So that's not really a good solution. In fact, when I tried implementing this in the community outside of that JS fiddle, I ran into all these issues because there's other JavaScript on the page that's also listening to things, and it's just not reliable. So let's just screw it. Let's try something really crazy. I don't have an example of this. It's kind of too weird, and I'm not going to spend much time on it. It did work briefly. So the idea is WYSI-HTML5 is all about reformatting the document if you let it. I had to go in and actually modify it to keep it from doing that. So why don't we take advantage of that? It works fairly well. It works too well even. So on paste, we can list that in every browser. Let's clear the contents of it, but we'll save them first. So we'll save the contents, the current selection. It's common for people to make it even cooler. It's common for people to select an area of text and then paste, which makes it a little bit trickier. You're not always just pasting it at the caret. So let's get rid of everything, but let's save the selection and the current state of the editor. And let's let the paste event happen. And let's let the editor do its thing and reformat all of it. And let's get the result. And put everything back, preserve the selection, and then call insert HTML and throw the results in. And that actually kind of worked, except for you have to mess with the caret. And when you mess with the caret, you're messing with an API that basically doesn't exist, has no documentation, works differently across every browser. As I mentioned earlier, this is all reverse engineered from something IE did. It's set up for failure. Every operating system, every browser has a different idea for what you should do with the caret in a content-editable area. So for example, if you lose focus of the content-editable area in Internet Explorer, any version, it just resets the selection. So if I selected paste and then open a modal dialog or something, which I have to do for a couple of the functions of it, it'll just clear the selection and won't give you the time of day. So working with this was really tricky, and we got it working in Chrome. It was really cool, and it just didn't pan out in other browsers. So let's leave that one. It's embarrassing. So we had that first one working. We had that solution. It worked in a good chunk of browsers. Maybe 50. Off the top of my head, maybe like 50% of our user base or more. And at the very least, for the internal people who we can't really like sanitize some of the HTML and strip out the styles, at the very least, we can force them to use Firefox and Chrome. Like, we can tell them what to do. So let's go back to it and actually implement it. So one of the big things we're missing to make this work is, like, we have the HTML. We can get that. How do we convert it to plain text? It sounds like a simple problem. Notice before Chrome would remove all the formatting if I asked for the plain text version. Firefox is actually the only browser that does that correctly for some reason. I know they can do it because it works for text areas. So let's just work with the HTML whenever we have it. So in order to convert HTML to plain text and preserve the formatting, we want to rely on how it would be presented in the browser, because that's what the user cares about. The HTML already knows how it should be displayed. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an invisible element, and we're going to append the contents of the HTML to it. The idea is we want to look for block level elements. That is, elements whose style dictates that they take up the full width and push everything below them. That's when we know to insert line breaks. So we're gonna create this temporary element, append it to the body. It's invisible, and we're gonna get the contents of it and just every element inside of it. And that's what this find star is. I'm using jQuery, I know. And so if there's no elements inside of it, which is what happens if it's just plain text, we're gonna just return the text inside of it because we don't need to care about the rest of it. So we're gonna find line breaks as well. The nice thing about the BR tag is it doesn't appear as a block level element, even though it's functionally doing what a block level element is doing and pushing everything below it. So we're just gonna replace that with a new line. And so we're gonna iterate over the contents of it. They're in the DOM now. We know whether or not they're block level. You could create like a little DOM snippet outside of the page itself, and that would work, except you don't get access to how it's being displayed. It has to go through the rendering engine. The engine itself knows whether or not it's block level. So we're gonna grab the display attribute of it. And if it's blocked, we're gonna take the contents of it and push it back into the text block. So we're gonna kill the wrapper. We're gonna remove excess new lines. If I were to take that block of stuff and we're generated, it's got like 100 blank lines in it for no reason. So we just threw that in there, and we're going to join it back together with new lines. So we have a text version of the HTML. And this is kind of a variation of a bunch of different hacks that I ran across. So let's put this all together. And don't worry about the specifics of it. I'm going to just run through it. So we're going to get the clipboard data. But first, we're going to check and make sure the event has clipboard data. And if it does, we're going to prevent the default behavior because we want to override it. And so if there's a plain text version of it, we're going to use that because, well, if there's a plain text version, no HTML version, we're going to use that. Otherwise, we can't rely on the text version. And then we're going to use our cool HTML to text function, which I just went over, and get the results of that. So we have the text now. We're going to split it up so it's an array. We're going to wrap it in paragraph tags because that's how we want it formatted in the editor. We're going to join it all together and we're going to put it back in. And that's our base tag. And that's pretty much what I've got right now for that. And I welcome, if you have better solutions for any of these problems, if you've solved this problem, I would like to talk to you because this is still a bit of a hack. But I thought it'd be interesting because Contenteditable is kind of something that like you don't ever really have to use it, and when you have to use it, you wish you hadn't, and a lot of people haven't really heard of it. I hadn't really heard about it until I started working on this. So, any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Why can you not just replace the element that you're making content editable with a text area if all you want is to have it plain text at that moment, you know?
So a lot of the selection APIs and whatnot rely on, and a lot of the editor APIs themselves rely on having the same DOM nodes inside of it. So removing the content editable and replacing the elements inside it, anytime you touch them, it messes up a lot of stuff because it knows about different nodes. And there's actually, if you read the source of the WYSIWYG itself, it creates a bunch of temporary elements to get around that kind of, but it gets really messy. So anytime you have to remove elements in it or tamper with them, even like the wrapping and whatnot actually has a negative impact on the inner workings of it. It's very fragile.
In the end, did you still need, I saw you had a reference to the WYSI HTML5 library. What do you need that for at this point?
That's a good question. Actually, I spent a lot of time working inside of it. So the core library, we used a variation of it called Bootstrap WYSI HTML5. And actually the Bootstrap part of it is completely missing. I rewrote a lot of it to work with our internal Spiceworks UI toolkit stuff. But the actual WYSI HTML5 library is pretty much intact behind the scenes. There was a lot of stuff I went in. The author and I disagreed on a lot of things, and pretty much everybody in the community disagreed with them. There was like a couple hundred forks. So I was taking a lot of community suggestions and putting them in, and it ended up being kind of a custom version of it. So a lot of that was just built into the library. Yeah.
To convert from HTML to text, you added the pasted HTML to the DOM. Is there any security implications of that?
That's a good question that I would like to address afterwards. Yeah. I mean, it's stuff that the user can inject themselves. I mean, it's kind of like the JavaScript URL thing that Chrome has disabled it recently because you can convince people to copy and paste JavaScript into the URL bar, which steals session information and whatnot. That would have to be the same attack vector for this. But I'd love to talk about that more afterwards.
Yeah, it's kind of on the same line. You are basically stripping everything except the text plain, so you are not allowing HTML tags or anything else like that, right? So
as far as HTML being in the editor itself, we don't really care because it's getting sent back to the server and I still process it. When it's displayed, it's still sanitized heavily. We have a whitelist of elements for regular users. Admins have a different rendering method that allows them to have like inline styles and like other kinds of tags. But in the end, when it's being displayed, like all scripts are being stripped out. We're using a lot of the normal Rails helpers for displaying it. So I'm not worried about cross-site scripting or any of that. But I mean, they can still screw with the page however they want to. They can put anything into the editor. It's just when it's saved is what I care about mostly. Yeah, valid point. Okay, cool. I'll hand it over to Matt. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Microsoft Word that was like unrelated.
Hey, can everyone hear me in the back? Yeah, cool. All right. My name is Matt Kemmerer. I'm a front-end developer at Spiceworks, and I want to talk to you today about a JavaScript library called D3. D3, the internet assures me, stands for Data-Driven Documents. It's a library for doing data visualization. And one of the reasons I like to talk about it is that, in my experience, it does things a lot differently from other charting libraries that you might have used. So if you've used pie charts before, or Flot, or Raphael, or any of those, D3 requires sort of a different way of thinking about things to use. And as a result, it can be extremely expressive and flexible. So here's, some of the many different kinds of visualizations you can do in D3. Today I'm going to look at some toy examples, and at the end go through building a chart. This is kind of a 101 level talk, so if you've used D3 before, or if you work at Spiceworks and you've come to one of my other talks, go check Twitter for 10 minutes or something, and we'll come back later. Okay. So usually when working with D3, one of the things we're going to do is manipulate SVG elements. SVG is a standard called Scalable Vector Graphics. It's a way of drawing shapes in the browser. And so that makes it a really natural way of doing charts and data visualization. So here's a really small toy example. I'm creating a circle and setting a few of the properties on it. CX is going to be the X position of that circle, so you can move it left and right using that. And CY is the up and down position. And then R is the radius. So that's, a really simple way to draw a circle using D3. But that's not sort of the usual way. The usual way of going about this actually is to bind data to that element. So for example, here I'm calling datum, which is the singular of data. And I'm adding that object to this circle. And what that lets me do then is to set its attributes not using just a literal string, but instead using a function of this data. So the color, I'm going to return whatever the color attribute of this object is and use that as the fill of the circle. This turns out to be a really, really powerful way of describing graphs, as I'll show you in just a bit. So with just a single circle, maybe that's not very well motivated, but as soon as you start drawing multiple elements, now this function does different things for different parts of your data. So I have now 2 objects in my data set instead of just 1. And I'm going to use a D3 idiom called the data join. This is where it gets kind of a little bit different than I've seen any other library doing. So in this example, what I'm doing first is selecting all of the circles, which seems like a really weird thing to do because I haven't drawn any circles yet, so I should just get an empty selection. And I do get an empty selection. But the next thing I can do is bind data to that selection. So now I have 0 circles in my selection and 2 objects in my data set. And so when I call enter, I'm telling D3 that since there are 0 circles so far, it needs to create 2 new ones. And that means that when I call this append circle, instead of just creating 1 circle, this is now going to create 2, or however many I need in my data set. I don't have a slide for it, but there's also an analogous function called exit. Exit, instead of creating new elements, will remove elements if you have more in your data set than on the page already. And by combining those two, you can do some really nifty things. You can create graphs that update live when your data changes. You can create interactivity. So that's sort of how to create elements in D3. Another really powerful pattern is using scales. Scales are sort of a way of mapping from your data domain to your display domain. So on this previous example, I had the radius being 10 on this circle, but I actually want to display it much larger. So if I want to scale that up, I could just call 10 times the radius, which is what I did here. Or I can use a D3 scale, which is a function that makes a lot of that sort of math simpler to do. So in this example, I've created a new scale by calling d3.scale.linear. This will let me do two things. I can set the domain, and I can set the range. And then D3 will create that mapping for me. So if I have the range, a domain that goes from 0 to 1, and a range that goes from -1 to 2, then that will map 0 to -1. It'll map 0.5 to 0.5, and it'll map 1 to 2. And this object that I get when I call d3.scale.linear is actually just a function. And I can call these methods on it to configure it. But then when I want to use the scale, I just call scale on a number, just like you would any other JavaScript function. And scales are useful for more things than just sort of mapping numbers to numbers. You can also use scales to map from numbers to colors, or from colors to colors, if you ever had a need to do that. So in this example, I can map the numbers from 0 to 1 into colors from white to blue. So now I have this nice gradient that comes as a result of mapping those numbers. And then putting all of these concepts together, you can use this to build a chart pretty easily. So this is a little example that I created using the data from gapminder.org. So this is a project that sort of charts global trends. It has some really great data sets if you want to play with them. So this is one that's comparing the mortality rate, the infant mortality rate in countries across the world with the fertility rate. It's kind of an interesting graph, I think. But what I want to point out here is that I can build this scatter plot using just the things that I've shown you on those other slides. So for example, I can create a scale that will map from my data domain to the x position along here. I can do the same for the y-axis. And then once more, I'm going to create a scale to determine the size of these bubbles. So what I'm doing here is I'm mapping the population of each country to determine how big that circle is. I'm using the fertility rate to position it left and right, and the mortality rate positioned up and down. And then lastly, I'm going to create a color scale that's going to show a different color for each continent. So putting this all together, it looks a little something like this. Here's my entire chart in about 10 lines. It's kind of neat. So that was just sort of a flavor of working in D3. If you want to know more, there's a lot of great resources online. I really like in particular, there's a gallery of examples that's made by Mike Bostock. He's the creator of D3, or one of the creators of D3. So here is a number of examples. You can probably find whatever you're trying to graph somewhere on here. And then look into it if you have sort of questions about how to do that.
Could you just go back to that last slide real quick?
Yeah, no problem.
The link. Could you pull that link?
I'm sorry, which?
That one.
Right here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's all I have. I also have my own slides from this talk up on my GitHub. So if you want to check them out later, go find that. Thank you. Questions if you got them.
I have a question.
Yes.
Where's SVG headed? Isn't it starting to hit certain performance limitations, and people want to focus more on the GPU and like graphics acceleration? What's D3 as far as HTML5? And is there any changes planned for that? Or I know once you get really big, complicated SVG, I've seen it really start to slow down. Is there any type of Canvas or WebGL or stuff coming with this D3 framework?
Yeah. D3 also has a bunch of bindings for drawing to canvas. So if performance is a concern, and that is, in fact, you can find some of those examples here. A lot of times when you're drawing complicated maps where the outline is really jagged, that tends to work out a little bit better in Canvas because it takes a long time to render those shapes otherwise. But for things like bar charts and pie charts and scatter plots, I've been using SVG to draw up to like 10,000 points without hitting any real bottleneck there. So, as with everything, it depends on your use case, and your best bet is to profile. Yeah.
Okay.
How do you profile in JavaScript?
Oh, so that is one of the great things about using the inspector in Google Chrome, or other WebKit browsers have it too, I think. So there is this Profiles tab.
Can you zoom in?
Yeah, I'm zoomed out for some reason. Yeah. So one of the great things that you can do here is, collect a JavaScript CPU profile. That will sort of show you which of your JavaScript functions are taking the most time. Yeah, this is a topic for an entire new talk, but there's some great sort of great resources for learning about this on the web too.
How does D3 work on mobile devices? Do you guys run any of your stuff on like mobile browsers or anything?
I personally haven't, so I don't know if I can answer that for you, unfortunately.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
I use D3 on a tablet and it works fine.
Yeah.
As long as it's not a very complex chart.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Yep. One of the sort of unfortunate things about compatibility is that IE 8 turns out to not have SVG support, so you need to either go back and shim that or draw your charts a different way. All right.
Good deal. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's all we had planned for tonight, guys. We still got about 30 or 40 minutes before we have to be out of here, so feel free to hang out, come talk to me or talk to each other. And next month we'll be back here first Thursday of May. And I think we already have a speaker and a sponsor, but if anybody again is interested in speaking, reach out to me, or sponsoring, reach out to me, and we'll see you next month. Please clean up after yourself, throw your trash away. That would really help me out personally. So thank you very much, guys. Yeah.